a distortion, a serious distortion of the relations between the newly created center and the provinces, I still think that what we must be cautious about, and that's also very relevant to our current situation, is that, there's always a domain of political contingency. There's always an day because of decisions made by individuals in relation to institutions, or institutions backing them, but primarily individuals and groups of individuals.
In two minds about partitioning Punjab and Bengal. Is that one of the conclusions of your research?
I don't believe that he was in two minds about it at all. He was against the partition of Punjab and Bengal and consistently said that it was a mistake to confuse the partition of the provinces with the division of India between Pakistan and Hindustan. That, the great Pakistani fallacy is that you want to either blame one individual for everything that's gone wrong with your history, or you want a messiah that will solve all your problems. I mean, this is just a lack of a historical consciousness. It's about time that you realize that things are not that simple. It's not that one man made all the problems for you, and so that you can dump it all on him and say, well, it's all Jinnah's fault, and now you want a messiah from somewhere who solved everything with one magic wand.
India, United India, which were the Muslims not given their rights and so on and so forth. And, Jinnah wanted a separate homeland for these people, putting it very simplistically. And then the liberals in Pakistan, will not call it the secular community, but the liberals in Pakistan today think that Jinnah wanted a separate homeland for those people who ascribe to Islam, but not a separate homeland for Islam itself.
A variety of unknowns, and you have to juggle them. So he made history in circumstances that were not entirely of his own making.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this new episode of Political Economy this week with Asad Ejaz Butt on New Wave Global. I have with me Dr. Ayesha Jalal, Mary Richardson Professor of History at the Tufts University, also associated with the university's Fletcher School. Let me welcome Dr. Ayesha Jalal. Thank you, Professor, for joining.
Thank you for inviting me.
Dr. Jalal, the current situation, the political impasse, that has sort of shaped up in Pakistan, starting, the vote of no confidence that saw Imran Khan, the prime minister, ousted from his office, and then, a period of some sort of political turmoil that started after that, And then there are questions about Pakistan's political stability, a lot of which people think, experts think depends on how stable democracy is in Pakistan. One opinion on that is that, the way relative democracy is shaped up in India and Pakistan had roots in partition. And a lot of people think that the way Pakistan was set up, its ideological roots were ill-suited to have a stable democracy. Do you think that how, democracy is shaped up in the two countries, of course, more stable democracy as we saw in India, at least up till a few years ago, was a result of partition?
Well, I mean, I think that as a historian, it's very hard for me to give you these deterministic answers that this was because of partition. I mean, what these sorts of, while there's no denying that there were some structural constraints within which Pakistan's newly formed state structure had to be constructed. And that, as I argued in my book, The State of Martial Rule, resulted in a serious distortion of the relations between the newly created center and the provinces. I still think that what we must be cautious about, and that's also very relevant to our current situation, is that, there's always a domain of political contingency. There's always there's always some, however limited, space. And, people make decisions. So things happen because of human decisions, i.e. human beings have to take responsibility for the decisions they made. So rather than answer you by saying that there was something inherently unstable about partition, that led to the current impasse that we are witnessing. I would say that we are in the mess that we are in today because of decisions made by individuals in relation to institutions backing them, but primarily individuals and groups of individuals who, probably thought that what they were doing was correct, but they have to take responsibility for this cumulative scenario where democracy is unstable. So I don't think, if a different road had been taken, I don't think that there is anything inherently wrong with the creation of Pakistan, and it could have been a success story as well if institutions had operated within their parameters. So I think all that is not something that was done by a divine force. It was done by human beings, by Pakistanis themselves. So I think that responsibility and then learning from that responsibility is important, rather than to go for abstract ideas of how something is inherently unstable, which is what your question initially suggested.
Yes. So talking about the partition, Professor, and of course you've done extensive research on Jinnah, do you think, and this perspective has been quoted, often attributed to you, so I wanted to sort of run it past you directly, that Jinnah right before the partition, he was in two minds about partitioning Punjab and Bengal. Is that one of the conclusions of your research?
I don't believe that he was in two minds about it at all. He was against the partition of Punjab and Bengal and consistently said that it was a mistake to confuse the partition of the provinces with the division of India between Pakistan and Hindustan. Because as far as he was concerned, Pakistan and Hindustan were within India, and so they had to negotiate the future all India arrangements, whether as independent sovereign states or in a confederal arrangement. So I think to say that Jinnah wanted the partition of Punjab and Bengal is not actually true. Yep. He in fact needed undivided Punjab and Bengal, the two main Muslim majority provinces, in order to extract maximum concessions at the all India level from the British and also the Congress.
Yeah, but do you also think that Jinnah would not have wanted Punjab and Bengal to partition, even if that meant, giving one of the two or perhaps even both the provinces to India?
Well, I don't think that there was any question of giving them to India. I think it's important for your viewers to know that, and we tend to simply gloss over that there is a prior history of politics in the provinces. Pakistan movement did not begin politics in Punjab and Bengal. And that movement, those politics were geared towards these provinces maximizing their provincial autonomy vis-a-vis the All India Center. So to say that Jinnah Sahib wanted to give one or could have given one was not in question, because the Congress party was weakest precisely in these two Muslim majority provinces of Punjab and Bengal. Here in Punjab and in Bengal, it was the Hindu Mahasabha rather than the Congress that was calling the shots. And in the end, it was the Congress heeding the call of the Hindu Mahasabha to partition Punjab and Bengal. So the call for partition was given by the Hindu Mahasabha, accepted by Nehru, and then taken over by the Congress. Jinnah was not really in favor. Jinnah was not in favor of. He wanted a Pakistan based on undivided Punjab and Bengal.
And were there administrative reasons to do so, or was he foreseeing the ultimate bloodshed that would take place?
No, the point is that he was basing his Pakistan demand on the Muslim right to self-determination. Yeah. Which was in those days a very potent cry for across the world. And so the point is that if you were demanding the Muslim right to self-determination in Punjab and Bengal, you couldn't deny it to the non-Muslim elements. So that was, as I argued in The Sole Spokesman, my first book, was the Achilles heel in his strategy. And the only way he could have avoided that was as he tried by accepting the Cabinet Mission Plan in 1945. That they could stay within an all-India arrangement and the provinces would not be partitioned, and the Muslim League would be able to take advantage of the weight of Punjab and Bengal and use it to good effect at the all-India level. But since the Congress was not prepared to accept that, and the demand was that and this is what the British did wrong, because prior to the 1945 elections, the governors of Bengal, Punjab, and Assam tried to urge New Delhi and also indirectly London to make it clear that a vote for Pakistan could mean the partition of Punjab and Bengal. No clarity was given, with the result that the Muslim League campaigned on a Pakistan, which, as far as their supporters were concerned, was going to be based on undivided Punjab and Bengal. But when the Muslim League won in Punjab and Bengal, and as you know, they were locked out by Governor Jenkins in forming a government in Punjab. And I think that was a very colossal error, because that made the Muslim League much more prone to taking a non-constitutional method, and the movement that they launched, which it was basically because of them not being able to form a government. So what I'm trying to say is that it wasn't in Jinnah's hand. I mean, we tend to bestow so much power to him and so much volition. He was a man who was constrained by other factors. And the most important factor was that there were dynamics in Punjab and Bengal that didn't permit an easy handover to the Congress, even if the British had wanted it. So there were internal divisions, and the Muslims had a bare majority in both these provinces. I don't know whether that makes sense to you, what I'm trying to get at.
Absolutely.
So it wasn't just, yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely does. So another perspective that, I was reading one of the reviews done on the Jinnah and the Sole Spokesman, and one of the reviewers had attributed to you, and I just want to again run it past you. Maybe that's one of the interpretations of what you've written in the book, is that Indian National Congress, national level leaders in the Congress like Nehru and Patel, right at the cusp of the partition, were more interested to partition India and perhaps even Punjab and Bengal than Jinnah was. Can we sort of?
Yes. That's exactly the point. That in order to gain power at the All India level, and that too. Despite all the talk about a united India, they were more interested in getting power at the All India level than keeping India united. So rather than share power with Mr. Jinnah, the Congress preferred to divide. So it was a decision by the Congress High Command. So,
right.
So partition was forced. Jinnah, as I said, Jinnah always made a distinction between the Pakistan demand and the partition of the provinces. He kept saying, don't confuse it. And don't also forget to remind your viewers that Mr. Jinnah, after the June 3rd plan, put forward a demand for a corridor, linking the two parts of. So, he was not prepared to accept this as a permanent or final solution. He expressed his dissatisfaction. He tried until the very end to get the British, or rather, a not very favorably disposed viceroy, to give him undivided Punjab and Bengal somehow. But he couldn't get it. And all he could get, as Mountbatten rather curtly said, that in Pakistan's case, we can either set up a nice hut or a tent. And in Pakistan's case, we're setting up a tent. Now, tents, as you will all remember, tend to fold up very quickly. So it was not meant to be a long-term solution. And it was meant to fail.
So on that point that it was meant to fail, you know.
I mean, it wasn't deemed to be viable economically. It was not deemed to be.
Yeah.
It was just seen to be an unviable state.
Right. And of course, Pakistan did have a shaky start.
It continues to have a shaky existence, as you are aware. I mean, so the question is that what I'm trying to say that this is not only because of, without denying the structural obstacles and India's own attitude and the problems in the region and in the Cold War, I still think that we must allow space for human decisions that were made by those responsible for policies in Pakistan. You can't just write that out.
So yes, agreed. Yes. So, but Pakistan did have a shaky start, and of course continues to do so. One explanation for that is, and of course it's like an accusation on Jinnah, which is that he was, you know, obfuscating things in the early days of Pakistan by, you know, promising different things to different groups and different political parties. You know, I know a responsible historian who's accused Jinnah of doing so. Do you think that, you know, Pakistan's, for instance, confusion between whether this would be an Islamic state or a secular state and so on and so forth were confusions that, you know, came about because Jinnah was promising different things to different political, social, economic groups?
I don't think that, you know, the great Pakistani fallacy is that you want to either blame one individual for everything that's gone wrong with your history, or you want a messiah that will solve all your problems. I mean, you know, this is just a lack of a historical consciousness. It's about time that you realize that things are not that simple. It's not that one man made all the problems for you, and so that you can dump it all on him and say, well, it's all Jinnah's fault. And now you want a messiah from somewhere who solve everything with one magic wand. That's not the way history works. So I think that there are multiple contradictions that were within the Muslim League movement or the Pakistan movement. There were those who wanted to take Pakistan in the direction of a more religiously oriented state. There were others who dreamt of Pakistan as a democratic, moderate Muslim state, where Muslims could live their lives according to their aspirations and culture. So these vied with each other. And, you know, politics, I will say, is the art of the possible. So to say that Mr. Jinnah was wrongfully giving different signals to different people, politicians tried, you know, the art of politics is to try and work together. If people interpreted Jinnah's statement in favor of Islam as leading to a desire to create a theocracy, which unfortunately some do, I think that's just an erroneous reading of history. He invoked Islam as a moderate force, and he also made it clear, I think you should be reminded that somebody who was very committed to creating an Islamic state, so-called, in Pakistan was the Raja of Mahmudabad. Who was one of the great financiers of the Muslim League and one of the few people that Mr. Jinnah, who was known for being somewhat frugal, entertained lavishly in his home in Malabar Hill in Bombay. But despite Raja of Mahmudabad's insistence, Jinnah rejected his desire to commit to get Jinnah to commit himself that Pakistan once created will be, he said it will be what the people of Pakistan or the representatives of Pakistan want. And then Nawab Bahadur Yar Jung also tried in 1943 to get the Muslim League to commit itself to an Islamic state, and he rejected it. Now to say that when he met people, he used Islam, and therefore Islam, because people cannot be analytical, meant everything, and no democracy. And I mean, I think that's just a fallacy of thinking rather than of the actual historical reality.
Professor, on that note, you know, so the secular community in Pakistan, or perhaps the the liberals
I mean, let me also make it very clear that the other great fallacy in Pakistan is this presumption, totally erroneous, that there is a so-called secular polity that is somehow against religion. Now, religion and secular are not antithetical terms. Those who are anti-religion, and I mean, as you just open any lexicon in Pakistan, Urdu lexicon, and look up the word secular, and its meaning is given as la diniyat. Now, this is an erroneous, ideologically mischievous imposition of a term. Secular is not the opposite. Religion is not the, I mean, and secular are not opposite. The opposite of religion or anti-religion, there's a word for it, and that's atheist.
Yes.
So if you look at the history of secularism in Europe, those who advocated a secular polity were not against religion. Here I include Voltaire and many others. They were against the church fathers. In the subcontinent, secular was never meant to be anti-religion because, first of all, there was no church in Islam or Hinduism to separate from. So secular in the use of the term by the British or by even the post-colonial state was question of neutrality, that the state will not promote one community over the other. It will not favor. It will be neutral. That was the idea of secular rather than one opposed to religion. So I think it's time that people caught up with some history and some basic analytical terms. अभी तक समझ नहीं आप लोगों को आई तो the point is that is the real problem.
Yeah.
You're just going in circles and circles and circles and looking for fall guys. Jinnah is a favorite fall guy in your desperation because you've made a royal mess of yourself. But I don't think that it's that simple. When history is written in the long term of this particular period in your history, you're not going to get away. I mean, the people who want to blame Jinnah are not going to get away with it. I can assure you of that.
So thank you for an elaborate answer, Professor. So do you think that, talking about Jinnah again, that, there was this suppressed, as far as, our history books tell us, there was this suppressed, downtrodden community in India, United India, which were the Muslims, not given their rights and so on and so forth. And, Jinnah wanted a separate homeland for these people, putting it very simplistically. And then this, the liberals in Pakistan, I'll not call it the secular community, but the liberals in Pakistan today think that Jinnah wanted a separate homeland for those people who ascribe to Islam, but not a separate homeland for Islam itself. Do you think that this is, a valid explanation for what was happening at the time?
Just remind me of your first point about religion and that Jinnah. I just kind of lost your.
So he was the idea for a separate homeland for those people who were suppressed, who were,
first
of course,
of all,
Muslims.
I think you need to understand that the Muslim community of India was not a monolith. Yeah. There were some Muslims in certain regions who were doing quite well, both politically and economically. They may not have had as much political power as they wanted, but they were doing reasonably well. Yeah. There were other Muslims who were, but I think that this was not the primary factor. I think the far more important factor, and if people just were to read their history, was the center region issue. The fact that there were provinces that were created. I mean, if you look at Jinnah's points, his points were that they wanted Muslim majority provinces where Muslims would consolidate and have power and exercise power. So to say that he created a Muslim state so that people could simply have their dream of Islam, I think he was looking for a power sharing arrangement for the Muslim community. I mean, I think it's also important to remind your viewers that there are more Muslims today who live outside Pakistan than within Pakistan.
Yes.
How can you say that a man that you yourself describe as a rational, cold-blooded logician wanted this solution? I mean, you can't add 2 and 2 and say it's 5. and insist that the whole world is wrong and you are right. I think that's the problem, that you can't add up and come up with a conclusion. It doesn't make sense. I mean, this is what happened. I mean, to say that Jinnah had an idea and he got what he wanted. History is made through a variety of unknowns, and you have to juggle them. So, he made history in circumstances that were not entirely of his own making. This is what came out.
Right, yes, yes. But do you also, from a purely administrative standpoint, comparing how, the early sort of India after partition was being sort of set up by the Indian leaders, and how Jinnah was sort of setting up a state here, a newly born state here in Pakistan, do you think that, some of those early decisions, like you said, that, it's human decisions which ultimately matter? Do you think that Jinnah's how do you sort of rate the decisions that Jinnah made?
Want to argue that Jinnah's decision to hold a referendum, and I mean, after the referendum in the NWFP, and then the dismissal of the Khan government shows his lack of commitment to democracy. I think what people need to be reminded of is that it may not, the authoritarian dimension, as I argued in my book, Democracy and Authoritarianism, is built in to the Government of India Act of 1935, which is the constitutional basis of both India and Pakistan. So the authoritarianism and democracy are not stark antithetical opposites. They are really two ends of the same spectrum. And in the battle for dominance and resistance, if you are, if there is a greater resistance, there is more democracy, and if there's more dominance, there's more. It's a constant seesaw process. So in that context, when he was still operating within the constitution. He invoked Article 93 to dismiss the Khan government, which had clearly lost the moral authority to govern. That's what the referendum showed, that there was a sea change in Pathan feelings after the 1945 elections, where they did vote for the Congress, NWFP Congress. So I think that you should also keep in mind that Mr. Jinnah in the early, he didn't survive for more than a year for everybody to blame him for all that's gone wrong with you. Yeah. It's true that he dismissed the Khan government in the NWFP, but that, as I said, was constitutional, within the constitution, albeit an authoritarian tactic. I tend to sort of blame him more for his insensitivity towards the Bengalis by insisting on the language question. I think that was insensitive, but that too can be explained in terms of a context where Pakistan was meant to be a temporary solution and was meant to collapse. So he did need to take some actions that were more oriented towards state consolidation. But that didn't mean that you had to remain in that mode perpetually. I think that is what has happened. So I think Jinnah was still operating within a constitutional structure. The tragedy of Pakistan is that everybody who comes here makes laws for others, but they are free of all laws. And they just, the laws, people talk of rule of law, but what is rule of law if rule of law is simply meant to bolster those who are in power already? It's not a rule of law that anybody subscribes to. So I think that we need to be aware of that. And I think the tendency and desire in the absolute frustration in which this country finds itself to blame it all on Jinnah is just too easy. And ultimately, it doesn't hold water.
There's another, this would be my last question, Professors. Lovely talking to you. We're just rushing towards the end of the show. So I'll ask my last question. So, since we've discussed a lot of discredits of Jinnah, and you've given great explanations of how, we tend to sort of blame too many things on Jinnah. But another discredit is, and people really talk about it, is that, the Pakistan movement and, Jinnah's struggle before 1947 to, form this separate state called Pakistan. was not entirely Jinnah's effort or not a credit to the Pakistan movement, but the British, because of the World War II, wanted to leave the subcontinent, and the Second World War basically expedited that transition. Do you really think that, you know, the World War II had a large role to play?
I mean, there's no question that the British used Jinnah during the war, the Second World War, for their advantage to offset Congress's somewhat unreasonable demands for independence right then and there. Yes. I mean, they were not going to give independence to India whilst Hitler and the Japs were threatening them. So that aside, I don't think, I mean, the real point is that they believe that Mr. Jinnah was simply at the receiving end. I mean, there is this one line of thought that says that the idea of partition, following the Irish example, was so ingrained that it was nothing to do with the politics of the subcontinent, but in a perverse way, partition from the international arena came and got, used. I just think that's just bad history, frankly. So the other point is that the British had a agenda to divide the subcontinent when they left. And I think that's a moot point. They may have been, if you look at the Foreign Office papers or Defense Department papers, you may have a bureaucrat, a petty bureaucrat, writing comments in the margins. But I'd like to see a policy, a stated policy of the British government calling for the partition. What I'm trying to say is that there was always a division within the British. And the reason is very simple. The British may have divided Indians whilst they ruled India, but when it came to quit, they had no interest in necessarily dividing. They may have been Tories, conservatives like Churchill, but yeah. Churchill did not represent everyone. So I do think that unless you can find me a policy which goes to Churchill and Attlee and all saying that partition is a great thing, we'll really exploit the two countries, pit them against each other. I mean, these are again all fabricated. And again, I think that the idea to blame it on the British rather than the politicians of the subcontinent for failing to agree, and here I include Mr. Jinnah, is again trying to shun responsibility and blame your problems as gifts from abroad. Blame your own self, but within a reasoned assessment, not lumping one individual with everything. There are historical dynamics. Individuals make decisions and policies constrained by those historical dynamics. And so I think that the biggest failure and what caused partition was the inability of the Congress to cut in Mr. Jinnah and agree to share power in a way that would have been possible. And I mean, when people say, how would that have worked? Well, there was a cabinet mission plan that Mr. Jinnah accepted in lieu of a fully sovereign Pakistan. He was forced to go back to that, because the sovereign Pakistan that they were giving him was based on the partition of Punjab and Bengal, which he did not want. Got it or not?
Yes. Thank you, Professor.
I mean, not that it will make any difference. I've been saying this for so many decades, but I think there's something wrong with the mindset, which makes something that it makes it impossible to comprehend something so simple than that. And you'd much rather be in a scenario where 1 + 1 is 3 and 2 + 2 is 5 than to accept some basic historical facts and put them together coherently.
Right. Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you. Sorry, I've reached the end of the show. I wanted to, talk to you
maybe another
further.
Time.
Yes.
Maybe another time.
Maybe another time.
Okay, Asad. All the best. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining, Professor.
Take care. Bye-bye.